So, did you manufacture brand names I would recognize, or was it private
Well, welcome to the College of Complexes. This is our 268th meeting since we started in February of 2009. We put a speaker on every week, a different subject. We require a speaker to take a position on an issue or express a point of view. They have to be for or against something. We don't care what it is. We give the speaker an hour to make a presentation. If they go over an hour, we cut them off. If anybody interrupts the speaker, remind the interrupter we're going to listen one fool at a time. That's one of our rules. And then we have question and answers, not speeches from the audience. Not speeches, remember that. And then we have remarks, rebuttals. Everybody that wants to gets 5 minutes at this podium to respond to what the speaker said for or against. When the speaker gets the last word, gets a comment on the comment and close the meeting. That's how it works. But before we introduce our speaker, we have announcements. Are there any announcements? I will. Jim's going to give that. We already covered that. Anyway, we will want to. Well, I'll say it too, and he can add to it. But we have a. We've been told that we were too noisy and we were too swearing and so on out here to the public, and it's not a good thing. So we have to watch our language a little bit. Make sure you don't get too excited. That's the main thing. Jim, you got something you want to say here? All right.
Well, having been to all of the meetings, except I think one that I missed on account of a family event, including hosting the events when Tom and Susan would be out of town on vacation. I've pretty much seen all of the flavors of the different groups who come together and meet. And it's been a very interesting group. The diversity of the group is one of the things that I tell people about when I'm selling the virtues of coming and participating in College of Complexes. We really are a very diverse group. This is not a class down at a neighborhood church or one of the neighborhood community centers where we're all just next door neighbors to one another. We come from afar, and we are very diverse in education and background and work professions we've been involved in, and religious backgrounds, both at the start of our lives and the current stage of our lives. So we do have that diversity, and that's what makes it interesting. And for the most part, I think we've only had a couple of nights out of all these where emotion has gotten too high and people have let things out of their bag that shouldn't happen. If we want everyone to feel free to ask questions in an open format, and we want people to feel free to stand up here at the end of the session and offer comments, we have to have enough kindness and gentleness in our spirit that we reflect that in how we speak. That includes the words we use and the tone of voice we have when we either ask a question or make a point at the end of the session. So I'm saying that to remind you that most of us know how to do it, and we want it to stay the same way. If that doesn't suit your fancy, then you might find it more peaceful to go, or more suitable to your fancy to go sit down on the park benches out in the open, where you can get together with a group of people and yell at each other if you want to, and nobody really cares. You know, it just, the noise flies off into the air, and you don't have the issue of a family sitting 6 feet from you with two early school-age children with words falling on their ears that they may hear at home every day, but we don't know that. We don't want to be the ones to be saying them. So I can beat on that drum until the end of time. But Tom, in fact, I wasn't going to say anything tonight, but Tom asked me to. So there's another dose of, come on guys, let's enjoy it. Let's keep it within the bounds and the limits we've set up, and make it a pleasure for everyone who's inside this room, and no disruption to the people who are outside the room. Appreciate that. Thank you so much. It's all yours, Tom. I didn't bring my ruler tonight.
Okay, any more announcements? Who's next? Susie had one, but she told me she didn't want to give it, but it was, don't forget to vote, May 9th. Just don't forget to vote. It's local elections for mayor and city council, so on. School board, yeah, gotta vote.
Replace the bet.
Any other announcements? That's it? Okay, well, next week is on the involvement of U.S. corporations. Jim Davis, author and college regular, will discuss that subject. It's on your itinerary there. I don't want to read all this. April 25th, At What Cost? Mavis Belize, co-chair Dallas Peace Justice Center, to talk about a nuclear-free world. She's with the Nuclear-Free World Committee. She's going to talk about, that's on your itinerary also. Take a look at it. Our speaker tonight is Tony Beaverson. He's going to talk about how the 3R's are killing our public schools. He's a former classroom teacher and executive director of the Oklahoma Education Association. He'll put forth his belief that a typical set of 3R's are with malice of forethought, hell-bent on destroying America's public school system. 3R's being Republicans, religion, and racism. He will illustrate how these three entities actively work in both coordinated and non-coordinated fashion to undermine the public confidence in what is perhaps the last bastion of egalitarianism in the country. Tony will review historic and current examples of how good dogma, ignorance, and intolerance of other cultures are used to achieve the 3R's political and legislative agenda, ensconced in a propaganda campaign worthy of Joseph Goebbels. So without further ado, please give a very, very warm welcome to Tony Beaverson.
Thanks, sir. I'll get my tea here in a minute.
How's that?
That's great. Thank you, Tom. Gosh, I guess the first thing with warning from, I think it was Jim over here, is this a gun-free zone?
Yes.
Okay, well, then I feel comfortable in going ahead here. I will warn you that I'm an Arkansas educated Okie living in Texas. So if you can accept that of my origins here, well, we're okay. Also was raised a hard-shell Methodist and graduated from that to where I have very serious doubts. So just that little bit about my background. In preparing for tonight, I looked at lots of statistics, rankings from the states, the nation, some historical data, and you find where Texas ranks in education, many aspects of education, and the quality of life, all the things that are so important to us. And it made me think that equally important to where we rank, what our statistics might be, equally important is how did we get there? Who's responsible? For in education, I hope you all know, the decisions are basically made by politicians. those of you who have taught school know that very well, as I did, and was sort of shocked to learn the realities of how little teachers had to say. The time of, or the school day, the school year, the curriculum, the books, you name it. It's decided by someone other than the teacher in the classroom. And yet, who catches all the hell and says, you know, it's our teachers that are the problem with our school? No, they're not. It's not the teachers at all. We have the best prepared teachers that we have ever had in the history of this nation. And there's a very good reason to why the turnover, most teachers, the majority of teachers, only last 5 to 7 years today. Now, if you remember back, when I was in school, all my teachers were, you know, middle-aged or older. And I suspect the same was probably for most of you as you went to school. Had a career, they stayed with it, and they were appreciated, they were respected. I recall I married and started teaching in Hot Springs, Arkansas. We didn't have much of anything, as most of us do when we start out. But I went to a store. We wanted to buy I think it was a bed, and it was a local furniture store. And I said, you know, I really don't have the money. Can we pay it out? He said, what do you do? I said, well, I'm a new teacher here in Hot Springs, just started. He said, no problem at all. No problem at all. He said, just fill us out, tell us where you live. And of course, I had no credit rating or anything. But that was the respect that we had for teachers when most of us were growing up. By the way, I look around and I don't think I see any cell phones, and that's good, but if you have your life alert on, you can keep that on if you want to. That's a joke. No, maybe that was a bad joke. Okay, I'm not Johnny Carson. Okay. As Tom said, I'm placing a proposition before you tonight that if you listen and watch anything other than Fox News, you're probably very much aware of what I'm going to say. And but maybe the good news is that there is a lot to say on my premise. Kind of begin with a little overview and then talk about each of the entities that I'm picking on. Question here first, though: is there anyone who disagrees with the idea that a quality public school system is necessary for a true functioning democracy? Anyone disagree with me? You do? You don't think we need a good public school system? Well, then I'll be interested to hear what you have to say later that we don't need a good quality school system.
Public, he said.
I said public school system, yes, a good public school system. One where people don't have to belong to a certain religion or they don't have to pay to go. And second thing I think is essential to a democracy, a quality form of government, is you have to have an easily accessible school system. One where all the kids can attend without too much difficulty. And we should all agree with that because it's in our state constitution and every constitution of every state in the country that the obligation of the state is to provide a quality, equitable school system for the kids in their state. Now, that, as we know, has not been true in Texas nor a lot of the states. They've tried to do it on the cheap. It's been more about the tax rate than the quality of education for our youngsters. And that backfires, as I think we all know. Even the folks that are have as their main concern in life a nickel on the tax rate should understand that if you want to, if you really want to save taxes, it's kind of like the old Fram filter ad. You remember that? You can pay now or you can pay later on your car. That's exactly what we have now. We haven't been paying as much now as we should. And what do we have to show for it? We have, in Texas, the lowest percentage of high school graduates in the nation. Of course, every school has a lot of those same kinds of statistics, but we happen to be dead last. We have a huge criminal population. And as we know, most people wind up in jail because they took something they didn't want, or they didn't own, or they hurt someone for lack of a quality value system that should have come from the home. And it's always amazing to me that so many of the Republicans and so many of our religious folk think that the teachers ought to be teaching these things when they don't teach them at home. That has always sort of mystified me, is that how they can do that, but yet we're not keen on paying much. We're not keen on keeping the kids in school so much anymore. We have a terrible amount of truancy. Texas also ranks very high in truancy on the bad side of that. But we do have, a truancy law that says that kids have to go to school, and you can even file criminal charges against parents if their kids don't attend school. I don't know if you knew that or not. In fact, there's a bill in the legislature right now that is wanting to change that from, I believe it's a felony to a misdemeanor. Right now, there's some really serious charges. Most schools don't do that. But if there's habitual truancy and they've taken the steps necessary to work with the parents and the kids still don't show up for school, that avenue is open. Okay, let me talk about one of my favorite topics, and it's how Republicans are trying to kill our public schools, and they have for a good number of years. And believe me, I've lived it, I've fought it, I've done battle. It mentioned that I was executive director of the Oklahoma Education Association. When you look at the data now on Oklahoma, you'll see that it's about as bad as Texas. It didn't used to be that way. When I was in Oklahoma, from the late 70s through the 80s, we ranked usually like 32nd, 34th in teacher salaries and rankings, and we did not have a real high rate of turnover of teachers. It seemed to be a pretty good place to teach. We had good support. But at the time, we had a Democratic governor, a Democratic House, and a Democratic Senate. And they were always open to working with us. How many of you here actually have taught? Oh, quite a few. Great. Well, then you'll appreciate a little side story. I was meeting with the Speaker of the House. We wanted to, this was in about 1980, 82. I said, we need to pump up the retirement system for teachers. And he said, well, what are you looking to do? And so we were, as most of this stuff is actually done, it was over drinking. That was a big part of the job, was to entertain. And I said, Dan, he was an attorney from Stillwater. Teachers can't afford to retire. They don't have enough in their paycheck when they retire. And he said, well, what are you proposing? And I said, well, what we'd like to have is that a combination of, let's see, what was it now? I'm getting old, forgive me. We wanted to have a combination of age and teaching experience where teachers could retire with the figure of 70 combined. So if you started teaching at what, 21, and you taught for 49 years. No, it wasn't that. Let's see. God, how'd that go? I'm sorry, I apologize. We were trying to get at, it was where a teacher could have, with the combination of years of service and age, they could retire. And his point was, your formula would allow teachers to finish teaching and retire at the age of, I believe it was 55. And he said, that's too young. People should retire at age 55. I said, well, do you really want people staying in the classroom who are burned out, or who are tired, or don't have health, or have health problems, but don't have health insurance at that time? And he said, no, but I hadn't really thought of it that way. And I said, you know, people complain that there's a bad teacher for my kid. You know, I don't want my kid to go to her class or his class. But yet, you're going to force them to stay in there. And we actually got that passed. About 10 or 15 years later, they changed it. And so now I think the formula is 80 years of service and age, but something like that. Yeah. But you get the gist. I forgot the exact formula, but it was where they could have retired at age 55 after graduating and teaching. So again, go back to we had a group of legislators who were concerned about kids and concerned about quality education. And it was a joy to work there. Now, to our Republican friends, and I know that not every Republican believes this way, and so except that what I'm saying is in general, or what I'm going to talk about a lot, is their policies, fact, positions, fact, their platform, fact. Okay? Let me start with a controversial one here, the separation of church and state. The Constitution does not explicitly say separation of church and state, but it is the clear intent. And if you bother to do research and go back and read some of the writings of our founding fathers when they were putting the Constitution together, it's very interesting when you learn of intent and what things meant. And as we know, a lot of times we say things and they come out one way, but our intent is another. But let me just give you exactly what this is, and I want to read this to you. Let me ask a question. Do you believe that our Constitution calls for everyone to have the right to privacy, the right to a fair trial? We don't. Those things are not explicit in the Constitution either. But the intent is clear, and we have observed that, as for many, many years, we observed the separation of church and state. What the Constitution actually says is, Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the exercise thereof. And so it reflect back on our founding father. What did we learn early on in school? They came here for religious freedom. Did not want to have a state church. In other words, separation of church and state. The founding fathers said, we don't want a state church. What's happening now, the Republicans are trying to put church into the state. And they're succeeding in a lot of places. Now, I don't think anyone, myself included, should have any problem with all kinds of religious schools, private academies, all you want. Pay for them. Don't take my tax dollars to pay to promote your religious beliefs. I don't care if your beliefs are Christian, Jewish, Muslim. Those don't belong in indoctrination. And in fact, that's what I've discovered over the years. It hit me quite some time ago in talking to my Republican legislative friends that we worked with, that they were more in favor of indoctrination than education. They wanted kids to believe what they wanted them to believe. And excuse me, but Lord knows that schools should be there to teach kids how to learn, to be, to excel in creative thinking, to be problem solvers, to understand situations and be able to deal with them, to cope, to make their way into the world. They're not there to be schooled in education or someone's religious ideology. That's not the purpose of public schools. Now, and I say back then, and when we first started having this rise up, I met with the head of some of the Catholic churches in Oklahoma, and at that time, in the 80s, they were not in favor of tax dollars going to the Catholic schools. They said flat out, we do not want the regulations that need to go with public schools. We want to be able to teach what we want to teach, and we all agreed on that. So they said, we're not here to push the legislature to give tax dollars to the Catholic schools. And I thought that was great. Of course, a lot of this has changed now. We've learned since the St. Reagan era that greed is good. If I can get mine by running over you, that's okay. That's okay. Get out of my way. And we have seen all of the crooked politicians, the crooked dealings on Wall Street, the banks, the corporations, and they own our government, both Democrat and Republican. They flat out own it. And I've had people tell me or ask me in our discussions about politics, what's the difference as you see it between Democrats and Republicans? And I said, well, I agree, they're both pretty much owned by money. Who gives them their campaign money, takes care of them after they get out of office, takes care of their family and friends, and that's, that's from the school board on up. You've all seen it, if you've been around long enough and paid any attention. But I think the difference is the Democrats fairly regularly throw the working people a bone, even with a little meat on it. And they have some sensitivities as to not imposing your morals on mine, or mine on you. But separation of church and school is essential for any kind of democracy. And amazes me, we have here in Texas and all over the place, other states, we want the legislature to pass a law that we will not have Sharia law in any city or county in our state. What's the difference? It's just a different belief system, but it's still a religious system. If you don't want Sharia law, why do you want Christian law or Jewish law? It makes no sense. I don't understand how you might do that. The next thing, of course, is the main problem, and it's greed. Vouchers, tax credits, charter schools. It's all about money. Republicans cannot stand, again, in general, their leadership, they cannot stand that these tremendous amounts of money, billions and billions of dollars, are spent without someone making a profit. They want to profitize your children, our grandchildren. That's what it's all about. The Reagan started a lot of this. He's the one that really came out in the open with it. And he decided when he took over as president that he would have this big study. Of course, he picked the people who did the study. And they came out with a report entitled "The Rising Tide of Mediocrity in Our Schools." Next thing you know, we started having this business about testing and about teacher accountability. And the federal government, this is several years ago, spent $24 billion were spent with the testing industry. With the testing. Now look at all the rest of it that comes into that. But it wasn't just the money. It's how do you convince the public that the public schools are not doing the job, that they're failing your kids, if you don't have some basis for it. The basis for doing this and the propaganda campaign came through testing. And if you look even today, the curriculum that our state board puts out does not match up with the tests. And that's true across all the United States. It's not apples and apples. If you want my kids to pass, then don't tell me to teach this and test them on that. And that's exactly what's happening. But it's made the case to too many in the public that your schools are failing and the teachers aren't accountable to your kids. And you need to send them to a school that of your choice. Well, pay for it. Do it. Do it. Own up to it. You want your children raised with the religious training of your choosing? Wonderful. I'm all for you. Pay for it. You want them to go to an academy because you think that's something? Do it, but pay for it. Don't take my tax dollars. Look at the natural extension of that. If we're going to let people pick and choose where their tax dollars go, then can I choose how much of my money goes to the military? Or the fire department? Or the police department? Or the library? Are we going to get a choice in where all of our taxes go? Yeah. So you know, this is what I say. It's not as simple as people seem, but testing is a real boondoggle. So much money, but the key behind it was a plot, a plan. Believe me, it's a deliberate plot and plan schemed out many years ago to discredit the public schools. Another reason for that is, starting with Reagan, is the anti-union bias throughout the Republican Party. And the only way that you can have teacher input into a school that's meaningful is if you have a true teachers union, an organization that actually selects who would sit on the curriculum committee and is accountable to the teaching membership, and that their curriculum is not set by people who are not even educators at the state, who are appointed by the governor, who puts in there who he wants to. I mean, it's ludicrous. We don't have lay people setting the procedures for heart surgery. We don't have them telling them how to try a case in court. So why do we think that people who are not educators should be the ones who decide what to teach, when to teach it, how to teach it, what the curriculum is, how much time do you spend on it, da-da-da-da-da-da-da. It doesn't make any sense. But people have just sort of accepted this thing going on. And, of course, tax money. There's where you get the people. And I'm telling you, I mean, you can see my age. I'm 76. And we have so many, I call myself a geezer. And we have so many geezers who are so damn concerned about 5 cents on the tax rate, they vote down anything if it says tax. Like they're going to starve tomorrow. Now, there are some people who don't need a tax increase, but you don't have to worry about that in Texas. We're way down at the bottom in terms of the money going to schools. This state cut $5.4 billion out of schools in 2011, and they still haven't put it back yet. And even though they're proposing to put somewhere between $2 and $3 billion in this year, it will still not be equal to what it was in 2011. Do you think industry and business work this way? Do you think we don't target, the cities don't target bringing in industry? How much money do we spend on economic development? My little town of Sherman, Texas, Dallas, millions and millions and millions to bring industry in. What if we took that same kind of effort and said, we have reasons to believe, and testing is good, by the way. Those of you who taught, you know testing is essential. You have to test to know where the kids are and where they've grown and what they're not getting. And so we know how to deal with them. But if we would focus on, say, especially the kids in the poor, poverty-ridden neighborhoods, if we would focus money on those and do what we know what needs to be done, we just don't want to spend the money on it. That's the key. It's the money. It's the tax rate. It's greed. And if we would approach our schools, like I say, like we do bringing in industry, and we'll spend hundreds of thousands of dollars in little old Sherman, Texas, to bring in an industry. It's going to have 10 employees or 25 employees, but they're going to waive the tax rate for the next 10 years. And they're going to give them these 5 acres of land. You know, come on. You really want to deal with public education? You really want to have an educated population who is intelligent, knows what the issues are, and might consider the issues before they vote? Education, that's the answer. But you have to pay for it. Oh, shoot me, I'm get worked up here. The Republican platform on education. You can go online and read this, but let me give you a few highlights here. School choice, like I said, they stand for school choice. And that's just an excuse, as they're trying to do here today. Our lieutenant governor is hell-bent on giving money to not only private schools or charter schools, but to religious schools. Your tax dollars at work. It also leads to segregation. And that's what a lot of this is about. Oh, I've got some friends my age who kind of get tickled at them. I've said, how come you became a Republican? They said, well, I used to be a Democrat. Well, why'd you change? Well, the Democratic Party left me. Have you ever heard that? Or words to that effect? Well, you know when the Democratic Party left them? 1964, Civil Rights Act. That's when the Democratic Party left them. And as they've stayed that way. All the solid South voting Democrat was fine until we had equal rights law passed. And that's a lot of what's behind the charter schools and the religious schools. Then you can segregate. And also tell me this, how in the world can you justify saying we're going to give your tax dollars to private schools and religious schools, but they don't have to pass the same test that the public school kids do. They don't have to teach the same curriculum that the public schools do. But we're going to give them money. I thought, man, if I was 20 years younger, I'd just block in my garage and get me about 25 students, teach them what I want to teach them, make me a little pot full of money. And then look at the zealots come out of the wall. Look at the extremists that will come out of the wall when this happens. We may have Sharia law being taught in some schools. And how do you tell them? They can't. These things are not simple, and so many people think it's just simple. Cut taxes, segregation. Yeah, get those minority kids out of here, you know, and especially those kids that might have gay or lesbian tendencies. Oh, heaven forbid, you know. What religion? Truthfully, I hear my Christian friends tell me, oh, abomination. Well, if you really believe in there's no fallacy in the Bible, you okay with slavery? You okay with adultery? You okay with stoning women? You know? I mean, all those things are in the Bible too. What we do is cherry pick, as we all know. We pick and choose what parts of our religion we want to push forth and impose on other people. It's ridiculous. It's not sane. It's insane. Oh, all that, by the way, those are parts of the Republican platform. Also, they're anti-bilingual education. English only. Now you tell me how to teach kids that don't speak English your lessons. They don't understand a word you're saying. Then what do? They fall behind, they drop out of school, they get into crime, start peddling drugs, whatever, have more kids. We have a vicious cycle. But we don't, but also, as you well know, the Republicans don't want any welfare. No, no, no. You can't pull yourself up by your bootstraps, then to hell with you. Float grandma on an ice floe out into the Antarctic. They believe in the right to discriminate against gays, right in their platform. You know, I think if someone just came over here from somewhere else and heard what I'm talking about tonight, they think, this must be a nutty place to live. How can people have these kinds of beliefs and think you're going to have an intelligent electorate? And of course, we see what's happened to our electorate. Greed and ignorance drive it. Greed and ignorance drive it. You can't tell me that if people study the issues and have any kind of an open mind, we would have the legislature and governor that we have. It's just mind-boggling. I love this one too. They talked about Abbott. Oh, what a farce. Going to put money into pre-K. Going to put money in pre-K, but you have to, the kids in pre-K have to pass tests to get it.
Yes.
And it's not going to add any more kids. It's just going to be for those who are in there. And it's not going to add to making it a whole day either. But so you're going to find, again, these kids that need education the most are going to be the ones that don't get it. Discrimination. Again, keep them down on the farm. I have a theory. We still live in a plantation. We do. We do. And what we have is we have corporate America is the plantation owner. Our elected officials are the overseers, and the rest of us live on the farm. Unless, you got the other plantation down the way.
We're serfs.
Yeah.
Serfs on the corporate plantation.
That's exactly what it is. And the legislators are the overseers of it. They take care of the plantation for corporations. Certification. That's another thing they talk about. They said one of the things that they want for these pre-K kids, and I agree with, is only those who are certified to teach that. Now, let's go back again to testing. Did you know that over half of the teachers in the United States who teach math and science, that is not their degree of certification? They have alternate or temporary certification. I wish they would call for that. I served in Oklahoma. I was on the state certification board, and we set the standards, and we increased the standards for teachers. And people who think teachers' unions are just there to protect teachers are nuts. We want the best quality teachers that you can have. You have an incompetent teacher? I'll tell you this, you have an incompetent superintendent or principal. Because you can fire a teacher easily. Tenure, of course you don't have tenure in Texas anyway. Tenure doesn't protect them. All tenure is due process, which you expect if you go to court. And tell me this, if your boss comes to you and says, you're fired today, you're fired, young lady. Don't you think you deserve to know why? Don't you need to have sort of your day in, not court, but at least with the school board or with somebody about what are the charges of why I'm incompetent? And that the principal or whoever's evaluating you ought to have the data to support why you're incompetent? So all these things are propaganda that the Republicans, Karl Rove and Goebbels' machine have ginned up over the years. That there's just BS. It's not true. But people don't know. We have our own lives and other things we worry about. Rising cost of college for kids. You know why the costs are rising? The states cut their funding to the colleges. They cut their funding to the college. They used to fund, probably, I don't know what it is in Texas now, but I'll bet you that in the last 10 years it's been cut 20 to 25%. And that's part of why your local taxes also go up, is to support schools and things, because the state shoves it down. But of course, our Republicans don't want federal money. That might taint the state somehow, except for the things that they do want it for. You know, they will take the money for certain things, but not for everything. They turn that down. But what the Republicans want on the student loans for college is that they be turned back over. When Bush was in, student loans went through the banks, and they charged 6% and higher on their rates. When Obama came in, they cut those rates to, I believe it was 3.5%, and the government took care of them. Instead of it being a for-profit center to finance kids. You know how important is education? It's vital. It's number one. It is equal to, or maybe second only to, say, our safety, our defense. The other thing with Republicans that disturb me is they don't want you to challenge authority. Do as I say, not as I do. Women, you're subservient. Keep your places. Thank you. Another little story. This is just about 10 years ago. It was, I believe, the largest, and I'm not picking on anybody's particular religion. This is just a fact. The largest Baptist church in northwest Arkansas had a daycare center for years for the families. And I don't recall from the story in the paper and on TV at the time whether they had a ministerial change or a change in their governing board. But at any rate, they decided they were going to do away with their daycare center. And they listed 10 reasons why. And the things that they listed, and this is the truth. They said that women should not be in the workplace because they would be tempted by their bosses to do immoral acts. That if they were in the workplace, that they would dress inappropriately. Oh God! Anyway, the whole litany was this sex thing. It was this that women, you know, just and of course, if you believe in their teachings, is the woman is subservient, and so why would you think then, if she was subservient and she went to work for the boss, she might be subservient to the boss? Whoa! So you know, kind of follows. But I'm not kidding. That's a true story. Gentleman here I met as we came in went to Central State University in Edmond, Oklahoma. We held a conference with the school administrators and school board associations in 1980, 1981 at Central State, and it was on separation of church and state. Long story short, we had the religious community there, and the fellow who was making the pitch for why the schools should include religious thing, he came to it and he had a textbook and a Bible, and he said every word in this textbook should be viewed through this book. Now that's hard believers. I mean, they really believe that. And it's hard to deal with that when someone really has believed. And I think there's a term called cognitive dissonance. And essentially that means people believe what they want to believe. And it doesn't matter what the facts are. They're still going to believe it. You can put the facts out in front of them. They're still going to believe what they want to believe. I'll never forget that he had his Bible and the textbook. probably was a science book. But now, hey, one thing to remember, that while there's this disbelief in evolution by many of our religious friends, a lot of these corporate boys and our elected leaders go to church every Sunday, big in the church. They don't believe in evolution. But I'll tell you what, like St. Reagan, they believe in the survival of the fittest when it comes to money. This is kind of a strange notion there. Evolution one way or the other. I don't know. But biblical indoctrination has no place in education. The United States is a nation of laws. We operate by the laws of man, not by religion. And keep in mind, once again, our founding fathers, our founders came over here to escape imposed religion. And we don't need Sharia law or Hare Krishna law or any other law in our schools. And by George, we darn sure can't pray the gay away. So we need to stop that notion as well. Now, I always go back to, what was the message of Jesus? What did Jesus live for? What's most of the Bible about? How he took care of the poor and the underprivileged, right? Why don't we? Why don't our greedy corporate folk and our politicians who control the purse strings, why don't they take care of the poor? Why don't they take care of the needy? The people who need it most. I know, they're freeloaders, aren't they? Yeah, they're just freeloaders. I just don't get it. So many people who have done well, have really worked hard and deserve everything they've gotten, but they forget about the other people who've tried hard but still didn't make it. And believe me, if you taught school, not every kid learns the same. And they're not all going to make it. I don't care how good their teachers are. Okay, racism. No one in their right mind believes that we're past racism in this country. Certainly not in Texas. I tell you, if probably the elephant in the room has always been the election of President Obama, and the hatred that is fueled is mainly because he's black. We don't, Republicans don't talk about it. I mean, that's not the politically correct thing to say or do or act, but it's the truth. We've never had a president so disrespected and mistreated. And before Obama was elected, I don't think you would have found a single Republican who wouldn't have stood up and said to you, the position of President of the United States deserves respect. I don't care if you agree or disagree with the president, he or she deserves respect. They don't give it. They don't give it if you're not the right persuasion, you're not the right color, etc. Well, if we really believe in equality, we need to address the problems that minority children have in school and underprivileged and disadvantaged children have. They can all do pretty darn well if we would simply address that community and keep hypocrisy out of the schools, keep hypocrisy out of our lives. We know that smaller class size works, but that means more teachers. All the studies show it. I mean, study after study. Why do a lot of people want their kids to, the rich people send their kids to academies? Because they got 12 to 1. They got 12 kids to one teacher, 13 kids to one teacher. That's one of the big reasons. You go to kids in homes where the vocabulary is terribly limited, they're disadvantaged from the start. They don't know the questions to ask. They don't know how to ask them. You live in a home with no magazines, no newspapers, they don't watch the news. They have trouble putting food on the table. But again, we want to save taxes, educate the kids so they can be productive citizens. So do it now. And if we would target our schools to be more productive like we target industries, we would be number one. Okay. Root causes: greed, religious, racial discrimination. And if we don't start voting for the long term, instead of what's my tax rate going to be tomorrow, we just, you hear it all the time, we get what we deserve. We get what we voted for. But we need to stop that. We need to understand that we're paying for fire, we're paying for police, we're paying for our roads, we're paying for our bridges. We're trying to clean up the air, we're trying to clean up the water, we're fighting the Republicans, and we're fighting the corporate America. We just have to somehow bring some sanity to who we elect, and thankfully, hopefully, we'll start recognizing that teachers are not the problem, they're the solution. Education is the solution. It is the problem solver itself. So if we really want to have a better America, a better Texas, a better Dallas, we need to beef up our education and educate our children. And I hope that with everyone here tonight, whatever your beliefs are, own up to them. Don't make excuses, but go to the facts. And please stop holding on to things that aren't true. Thank you for listening to me tonight. Oh, stay here? Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, could I get my iced tea there?
Sure.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, thank you very much.
What do you think of the current home rule initiative here in the Dallas schools? It sounds so appealing, the idea of having home rule and control of our schools in the neighborhoods.
It does. It sounds terrific. It's so simplistic and appealing, isn't it? But it is a terrible, terrible concept. It will reinforce segregation, not just by color or race, but by almost any denominator you can think of. And when we don't visit with each other, we lose something as a nation. We lose something in our neighborhood. And when, I worry enough right now about the our current generation with the cell phones and the iPads, and the fact that there's not much interaction. And we all know the jokes, but they're too true about the two kids sitting at the table having their hamburger and they're texting each other. I mean, it's just incredible that those kinds of things actually exist. But you keep isolating people, and all you do then is reinforce my beliefs, and I'm not open to yours because I'm not going to hear from anybody but you and me.
Well, I'm concerned about it being, I'm concerned that it really is about corporations getting their hands in the taxpayers' pockets in the school system rather than the money going to fund education.
Oh, it would. It would open up a Pandora's box in terms of all the, whether it's salaries, buildings, maintenance, textbooks. I mean, schools are expensive, folks. I mean, I'll be the first one to tell you. They consume a ton of money. But, like say, outside of our safety, what's more important? Individually, I guess we could say, well, my health, because it won't do me much good if I'm not healthy. But yes, no, I think it's a terrible concept. Shouldn't happen. Yes, ma'am.
Okay, hi. You were raised in the segregated South. You said
I
you
was.
were from, and I have a friend from Arkansas, and she remembers black folks going to the back door, and she remembers that was wrong. And I'm just wondering, what effect did that have on you? Because you saw it probably more openly than I did.
Oh, yeah, I was raised in Batesville, Arkansas primarily. I was born in Sapulpa, Oklahoma, but moved to Batesville in the 3rd grade. And
What year was that?
when I moved to Batesville?
One fool at a time.
Oh, well, I think it's about 49 or 50. I was born in 39, so when I was in the 3rd grade. Don't ask me these taxing questions, I'm old. But anyway, yeah, it was completely segregated. They had the black schools. And of course the black schools, which none of us really realized at the time, they got the old textbooks when they were worn out, pages torn, covers off, they were handed down to the black schools. The blacks, yes, did not sit at the, they didn't go into the restaurants. They, all of the horror stories you've heard. In fact, say I graduated from high school in 1957, Little Rock. That was my senior year when Little Rock had to blow up in 1957. And when I went to college then in Conway, Arkansas, the next year, I met a number of kids who were in that 57 graduating class, Little Rock Central, and things like that. And of course, at that time, you know, I'll be honest, I didn't know any different. It wasn't even thought of as being racist. It was not thought of. I don't ever remember a conversation at the dinner table about blacks are inferior or blacks are whatever. It just wasn't anything talked about. It was sort of like you have the air and you have the water and the sky and your house, and the blacks go to that school and we go to this school, and that's just the way it was. And it really was not a topic of conversation, and I didn't learn any better for quite some time. And yeah, I truly though, I mean, reflect back, my dad ran a bakery, and he had 2 really nice black guys work for him, who I worked every summer in junior high and high school, giving the guys their vacations. I would work there a week off. And so I got to know these guys, and they were just super and big baseball fans, and we just had more fun, you know. And so I just never even thought about it. It was terrible. Now that we know.
Okay, the second part is, when was the moment of truth for you? Was there a time when you were teaching, or that you mentioned that you just said, hey, this isn't right?
Yes, and hadn't thought about it exactly that way, but I think the answer to that is when I was teaching school in Arizona. And I had kids, I was teaching 5th grade in Arizona. And I had kids from 2 different Indian reservations were bussed into my classes. And I drove a school bus. And I drove some of those kids back out to the reservation to get off. And when I saw the conditions, oh my God. I mean, you talk about hovels. A single light bulb hanging down in one big room. Trash everywhere. And I think that was probably what hit me first more than the disadvantages with the black community was the Indian community. And so then I started, you know, thinking more and more about that, and then of course as I grew older and moved different places, became friends with a lot of blacks. We became friends, all of us, and so it changed me. The older I got, the more I've become so upset about inequality and racism, and yeah, it's been a real journey, as I suspect for most of you. Yes, sir.
Tony, do you think the deliberate dumbing down of America is part of the class war, and where do you think it's going to lead?
Well, let me ask a question back. What do you see as the dumbing down?
I think the dumbing down I see in the media. I think the Reagan non-equal balanced legislation he passed has been outfits like Fox News, etc., the corporatization of the media, so you only get one slant of message. Anyone who has even a slightest centrist view is called a liberal and a pinko and so on. But I'm more interested in the firstly, do you agree with this, and do you think it's deliberate, and furthermore, where do you think this is going to lead the country in the long run?
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I wanted to see if we were on the kind of same track. Yes, I think there is a serious amount of deliberation behind this. And especially, like you mentioned, from the media. We have 5 companies that own all of the media in the United States, all the major media in the United States. And I think you get back again that if you keep people's expectations low, if you keep the status quo going, then it benefits those who already have it made. And it also, I think they lead to it leads to extremism, which would get to. I think we're going to have a. I really believe in the next few years we're going to have a major turnaround. I think the Republicans are going to be swept back out of office. It'll be a while in Texas, but I think nationally they're going to lose ground. I think in the next elections, and but it's going to take like the union movement from the late 20s and 30s. People have got to finally be fed up. People have got to get down to a point to where they don't worry as much, I guess, about what they have to lose. I went to training, talking to Tom from Chicago with Saul Alinsky, who was a great organizer. I went to his training in union organizing, and the tactics and the strategies and how they worked and why they worked. And as I was sharing with him, the one thing I asked him at the training, I said, one of the things that you described is basically you were dealing with people who, 2 things. They either were the people behind the stockyards who had nothing to lose, dirt, poorest, mostly black folks you could imagine, and had nothing to lose, sort of to lash out and to take tactics to, or the second thing was, which Tom's was a veteran of, you had unions who actually had control of their membership. If they said strike, they struck. I said, my problem in education is we have people who have a half a loaf. And it's harder to get them to organize and to take action collectively when they have more to lose. But I think that we're getting to that point. So I think we're going to see a turnaround. But yeah, there are people, the corporatists, to keep a cheap workforce, have everything to gain. Why did they ship all the jobs overseas? It wasn't to keep jobs in America. It wasn't to keep salaries up. It was to make money. And it went in their portfolios. It didn't trickle down. We found that out. We found out trickle down was the biggest scam in the world. Basically we got on our head. But yeah. Yes, ma'am.
What do you think of the actions of the state legislature currently in session, where they're looking to set incoming teacher salaries at $27,000 a year? Do you think that that's adequate, which is, I guess, roughly $13 an hour?
No way. It's actually an insult, and that's why I don't understand why teachers won't stand up. But I'll be brutally honest with you, because I did 30 years of organizing teachers and working with and for them. Too many Too many teachers still do what their husbands tell them, by and large. I mean, are overly influenced. I shouldn't say do what they tell them, but they overly influence, are overly influenced by. I've had teachers who have said, well, we can't support this bond issue. Why? Well, it'll raise our taxes, and my husband doesn't want our taxes to go up. Well, that bond money was going to raise your salary and to give you a better classroom and to help your kids, most of all. But no. So that's part of the problem we have, but I kind of got off track there. But it's an insult to think that is sufficient wages for a college-educated person, and with over half having master's degrees and beyond. Oh, and let me tell you another little irony. How often do you hear we had to pay the CEO of Corporation X $13 million in order to keep him because we have to have the best and the brightest to run our company? Well, why doesn't that apply to teachers? Why don't you want to attract the best and the brightest and keep the best and the brightest?
Well, just a follow-up to that question. You're talking about people who have had to go through and get their bachelor's degree, and many, as you said, have master's degrees, and in certain ISDs, my home included, you have to, there's a certain amount of time you have to have gained your master's degree while you're teaching full-time as well.
Yes.
Okay, so how long, I don't know if you're a math teacher, but how long in years would it take for someone coming out of college these days who's tried to pay their own way with student loans to pay that off at that kind of a salary with no merit increases or anything like that taken into consideration, which has been basically corporate America freezing merit increases and freezing wages for many years now. So that's why I say it that way.
Oh, you're absolutely right on track. It the cost. My son is a physician, and he had to. He did. I mean, he paid it back, but he had to borrow and pay back student loans, and so I have some familiarity. Not to the degree, though, that most teachers have, because he made a lot more money when he got out, so he could pay it back without the same degree of difficulty. But years ago, when I was teaching and then went to work first for the Arizona Education Association, we had what was called an index salary schedule. And the way it worked like this was that if this year, let's say a starting teacher is worth $27,000, and then a teacher with a master's degree, these hours over here, went over to this column, and then you came down, say 10 years of experience, 11, 12 years of experience, well, it would double at one point. Okay? And then the fight we started, and about 70% of the school districts, or maybe a little more than that, in Arizona had an index salary schedule. Then what we saw and had to fight happening was then the school boards didn't want to pay the teachers who were pretty much trapped there because they lived there and their families were there. So they would want to raise, let's say they would say, well, we want to get a $3,000 raise and be $30,000 for a new teacher next year. But they didn't want to raise that, what would have been $54,000. They didn't want to raise that to $60,000. And so I always said, well, if this person value this year was twice what a starting teacher's was this year, why isn't it today? And we won a lot of arguments with that. But that's pretty much all gone now. And so the concentration is on not rewarding experienced teachers, but increasing the starting salaries to attract teachers. And of course, what happens? You start having turnover. That's why they quit between 5 and 7 years. So no, but it really is an insult. But again, it's greed and taxes.
I
Yes, sir.
was wanting to inquire what, you were with OEA, and where were they based out of during the years you were working for them?
We were in Oklahoma City,
Okay.
and our office building was right across the street from the Capitol. And that was quite an experience. Quite an experience, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Enjoyed it. We had some good successes.
Are you familiar enough with teachers to answer the following question? If you're not, that's fine, say so. Do you have a feeling for if classroom teachers were given the following question, please list the 3 things that you would like to see change that would improve the quality of the product you turn out at the end of each year, and thus at graduation, and improve your job satisfaction. Do you have a feeling for what most teachers would answer? If you don't, fine, just don't answer. I don't know how you'd answer that without running a survey, but you may have been in the business long enough to have a subjective feeling.
No, good question, actually. I think I know the answer. The majority of teachers would say an opportunity for serious input into what I teach and how I teach. That's the main thing. It's being powerless that drives a lot of teachers out. They come into the classroom thinking, I'm going to save these kids, I'm going to teach these kids, they're going to do great, I'm going to be so satisfied, the satisfaction with my job is going to go up to here. And then they get in, and so many are disillusioned and destroyed when they find out they have this bright idea. No, can't do it. Can't do it. So I would say without hesitation, that would be number one. And that's what's always angered me, actually, is so many think it's always about salary. It wasn't. Never has been all about salary. It's always been more about feeling that I was educated to do this. Can I have a say in doing it?
Do you think that it is good education policy to assign the least experienced teacher to the most difficult and challenging teaching job?
No, absolutely not.
Then why did the unions allow school boards to send first-year teachers to the integrated schools and not the most experienced ones?
Well, there's probably 2 or 3 answers to that. One is that when you really have a teachers union, which most places don't, then that was bargained in the contract with the agreement of the board and administration. So it's not just the teachers, it's everyone agreed to do that. But it's just like most things.
Why did the teachers agree to that?
Well, I think probably, I'll be honest, I would say probably out of just self-interest. I don't want to go do that. That's right. Yeah, it's that I've paid my dues. You know, when I came in, that, you know, I can tell you when I moved to Arizona and was teaching 5th grade out there, I taught high school before, but I was assigned. They did grading then. We had 3 5th grade classes, and we had the high, medium, and low. We had the smart kids, the so-so kids, and then the not so bright kids. And I got the low learners or the slow learners that year because I was new on the block. And so then they had a system though that they rotated. So each year you rotate. Next year you got the medium or high, and then like that. And that's not a good system because you might as well put an X on the foreheads of the kids that are in that class, you know. And all the other kids knew. You know, in fact, I had class one year. I had a kid walk in class the first day of school, and they were just filtering in the first day. And this was a 7th grade class actually, and in Hot Springs, Arkansas. This kid came in. He stopped in the door and he looked around. He looked over at me. I was standing at my desk, and we were just getting kids in. He said, "How come all the dumb kids are in here?" Now you talk about being flabbergasted. You know, it was tricky trying to answer. I mean, just like that. But No, it should not be, and that's why I say though, if you would let the teachers in the school be involved and work in teams and be able to set up the system for how they're going to teach those kids and have the resources to do it, and they don't get 30 kids in a classroom that are having difficulty learning anyway, and they had the resources to work with the families and some help with getting to the families, then it would change. I think it would change.
Let me ask you one final question before we pass this on. I'll come back. Are you familiar with the GI Bill?
A little bit.
Did you ever participate in it?
No, I did not.
Do you know how it works?
Uh-huh. Some
So you-
degree, yes.
So you know that the money is allocated, money is not given to the school, it's given to each recipient.
Right.
They would decide where it's spent. Some of it
Yes.
goes to state universities, some of it goes to schools like Notre Dame, some of it goes to yeshiva, whatever.
Yeah.
Why couldn't tax money for, before you get to college, work the same way? It go with the student, not to the schools.
In the public schools,
Correct. Not public schools, the education.
education, well, of course,
Education.
at the higher
And
education.
let people decide whether they want to send their kids to a public school, to a private school, to a religious school, homeschool them. You have your school competition. Wouldn't that help y'all get better?
No, it would not. It
Why
would
does
not.
competition work in every business but not education?
It doesn't.
Which one doesn't it work in?
It doesn't work in corporate America. The corporations who do the best are underwritten by subsidies by the government. We don't have free enterprise.
Well, you tell that to Silicon Valley.
Silicon Valley, the same way. Look at Austin.
Silicon Valley is financed by private funds called venture capital.
Right, and they pay for it, and they get the profits from it.
That's
But-
right.
but
The
they don't
the ones that are successful survive. Compact Computer didn't.
But they're not taking our tax dollars. You have to go back again to what your tax
What
dollars.
are tax dollars? You want to get to an interesting discussion? Let's talk about what tax dollars are. The question is why doesn't it work? Why, if it works for higher education, why wouldn't a similar GI Bill system work for people before you get there?
It would work in this sense. If you had the money go from the tax dollars pay the GI Bill. The tax dollars pay for the kids to go to school. And the tax dollars are meant for the public good, not for someone's personal interest or religious purposes. And the competition, wait, let me finish. May I finish? May I finish? May I finish? May I finish? Schools are not manufacturing units.
Right.
It's not competition. You don't compete with schools. Schools are not a business. That's the biggest mistake that a lot of people make. Run a school like a business. A school is not a business. It's a human enterprise of learning. It is not a competitive enterprise. It is not a business for making profits. And again, don't use my tax dollars for somebody's religious purposes or to segregate the kids or destroy my society. And that's what you would do. It's not competitive. I'm not talking about higher education. You can take your in higher education you can take your GI Bill.
You were in Little Rock when the federal troops came in to integrate the.
I was in Batesville, about 90 miles north of there. Yes.
You remember which president was in office when they sent in the troops?
Kennedy. No, wait. God, I had to think. Ike, 57. Ike.
Do you remember what party he belonged to?
He was Republican.
Yes, indeed.
Yes, he did.
Do you remember who signed the majority opinion for Brown versus Board of Education?
Yes.
Who was that?
Same.
No, he was. It's the Chief Justice.
Oh, Earl Warren?
Earl Warren.
Oh, yeah. Okay, I'm sorry. I thought you were talking.
Remember what party he belonged to? When
Yes,
he was
Republican. Yeah, absolutely. Eisenhower did some great things. Our public transportation system, the highway system. Oh, I'm talking about Republicans and education and their stance.
Now let's talk about my tax dollars.
Okay.
If I want to send my child to a religious school so they can get some values, and I think that's important.
Mm-hmm.
Why is it that it's not my tax dollars when I get a voucher to pay for that, for part of that?
Well,
Am I not entitled to some value for my tax dollars?
well, you're making an assumption that the public schools don't teach values, and you're wrong.
No, I'm not wrong.
Yes, you are. Yes, you're wrong. That's the only thing I can say to you, sir, is you're wrong. You need to go visit some public schools. I assume that you haven't been in a while. Excuse me, I'm addressing this gentleman. If I have no problem with you doing that, but like I say, if you want to choose up where your tax dollars go, then let all of us. Don't just pick on the schools. Let's pick on where all of our tax dollars go. But you're dead wrong if you think values, good, high moral values aren't taught in the public school. You have no basis for that, I'll tell you right now. You're dead wrong. You've been listening to Fox News too much.
Question.
Yes.
Do you think that every child can be educated to the same level of simple mathematics and English and so on? And from that point, we should have vocational training or academic training? Because actually that's the system that was operating in the 50s in England. I mean, basically
Right.
that was it.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah. No, we have made a mistake by not having, in my opinion, more vocational type training. No, every child does not learn alike. Every child is not going to achieve the same level. It doesn't. We're not all programmed alike. We're not all raised alike. We don't have the same IQ, et cetera, et cetera. And to keep our workforce going, we have in Sherman, we have Grayson Community College, and they do a wonderful job, just a wonderful job in the tech field and in mechanical, and they have, gosh, and they keep expanding. But no, I have always believed, one of the things I liked when I was in Oklahoma, I don't know how it is now, but in the 70s and 80s, they had a top-notch vocational education program, really top-notch. It was second to none. Got national recognition. Yes, sir.
Are you familiar with the public education system in Finland?
Not any.
Let me explain to you exactly what it is, and then you can comment on it.
Okay.
What they do is they have basic schools, simple buildings. They have 10 students per classroom. They have highly paid teachers, and they are the #1 school education system, K through 12, in the world.
They are top notch, yeah. Yeah, they've implemented the kinds of reforms that we need to do here. There's other things that we can do, but they cost money. One of the best things that we could do to keep good teachers and keep them around, and we did this in Oklahoma for several years. While I was there, we got a bill passed that every first-year teacher had an assigned teacher in the school with them, and it wasn't like a student teacher. It was a teacher from that school who worked with them, and they had to work with them a minimum of, I believe it was 90 hours a year to work with them in a system. They got a stipend for doing this, and the state and the locals paid extra stipend for them to do that. And the thing that was wonderful about it is the law was written to where the teachers in the building picked the teachers who would be the cooperating teacher or master teacher who worked with that new teacher. It wasn't the superintendent assigning his favorite to get an extra $500 or any of that kind of stuff. And that worked out well. We got great feedback from the universities that they really liked it, even though they weren't involved. It wasn't a university guy coming out with them. It was the teacher in their building. And that really did help.
Oh, it's me again. My son is a coach at Mary Richardson School, and he coaches new teachers.
Ah.
And does anybody here know who Mary Richardson was?
Never heard of the school before, is it?
Or the school. She was a black woman who taught in Dallas in like the 40s, and she found out that she received half the pay that the white teachers did, and she successfully went all the way up to the highest court of the land and got her salary, and then she moved to California.
Oh, wonderful story.
Which district is it in? Where is it?
It's like Pleasant. It's.
Which district is it in?
I don't know the district. I just know how to get there.
That's a great story. I can tell you more recent, but it wasn't minority. When in 1979 and 80 in Oklahoma, we had a sizable number of school districts who paid women less than they did men for the same jobs, for the same teaching jobs. And we got that changed to where that did not happen anymore. And that was an example, say, of teachers joining together, say, hey, whoa, you're not going to do this. And it's really crazy with the majority of teachers being women that they called it a head of household stipend. But if you were a single man, you still got it. Yeah.
I guess you get
Thank
to
you.
sit down finally.
Thank you. Thank you. Thanks very much.
Sit down, we get to know.
All right.
Okay, now it's your turn to talk. So who wants to be first? You get 5 minutes. Come on up here. He's first.
Well, as you may have guessed, I'm a Republican. I think you'll find I'm not quite the demon you might imagine. You know, in I think about 63 or 64, we got separation of church and state. Supreme Court ruled that you couldn't talk about religion in schools. And, you know, having lived through that era and now, I don't see that we improved our schools much by doing that. Again, I still maintain that we don't teach values in schools. You know, our problem today is that we put too much emphasis on testing.
Yes.
And we try to cram facts into those little kids and expect them to regurgitate it back. And we teach facts, but we don't teach wisdom. And there's a lot of wisdom in religion. You know, I don't care which religion it is, there's a lot of wisdom there. And you don't have to advocate any particular religion, but you need to we need to take the wisdom that's in it and teach it to our kids. And we aren't doing that. Our present system doesn't recognize there's any value in that. And that is truly a sad thing. Again, I think that, you know, vouchers are a good thing. I think competition is good for anybody. You know, I used to be in the construction business, and most of my work was done by low, you know, I was a low bidder. You know, I gave the best value. And I think competition was good for me. It was good for my competitors. We learned how to do things better and cheaper. And schools will learn how to do that if they have some competition. You know, right now we're talking about another $1 billion bond issue for Dallas schools. Well, the problem is that not long ago we had $1.5 billion school system bond issue for Dallas schools and a big building program. And the reason is that a large percentage of our kids were going to school in portable buildings. Well, you know what? Today, every dang one of those portable buildings is still there. And the population of our school has not increased that much. The fact is that $1.5 billion went to greed. You know, the contractors and people just feasted on it. And at the end of the day, we got nothing. So the question is, do you want to vote for another $1 billion bond issue? Because it's going the same way. You know, that's a sad proposition, but that's the way it is. I don't think our present politicians are smart enough to manage projects of that size. But, you know, I don't think that vouchers are about discrediting public schools. It's about people who want their kids to be able to go to a school that embraces their values. And I don't care whether they're Muslims or Baptists or Catholics or Hindu. You know, I think they're entitled to that. They're entitled to some value for their tax dollars. In terms of the rising cost of college, the fact is that we don't subsidize college tuition as much as we used to. When I was going to college, you could have all you could eat for $50 a semester, you know, to sign up for all you had. The reason is that a much smaller fraction of our kids were going to college, and it didn't cost as much to subsidize them. You know, right now we think everybody ought to go to college. Our president thinks everybody ought to go to college. I think they ought to all graduate from high school personally, but we were a far cry from that. On the subject of racism, we're not perfect, but we're much better today than we were then. You know, I can remember when they segregated Jourdanton High School, and there weren't many black kids in Jourdanton. About 4 showed up, and they just showed up. Nobody thought anything about it. You know, they were just there. I think that segregation was wrong. I think Martin Luther King was a great man to stand up and say we're not going to take it anymore. But I think that America was ready to acknowledge that. Is the reason that it worked well for him. Like Tony, there was no animosity against black people and the white race. It was just, that's the way it was. Where I came from, it was pretty much that way with Hispanics. You know, my grandmother had a lot of Hispanic friends, but at the same time, if someone was working there on their ranch and came time to eat, well, she served him in a different room than the family. You know, that was wrong, but that's the way it was. He didn't think anything about it, and she didn't think anything about it. It's not a good thing, but it's the way it was. We need to do better than that. But I belong to a Toastmasters club here in Dallas, and we have about 40, 50 members, I guess. And we are a very eclectic club. There are black people, there are Indians, there are Chinese, there are Japanese. We have an Egyptian, plenty of Hispanics, just all races. And we don't have an affirmative action program. You know, they just come and they're accepted. You know, there's no racism there, you know. So, you know, it's a great thing that we do that. But I think that there are a lot of people who are professionally offended, who make their living out of stirring up racial strife, that make a lot more of it than is truly there. In terms of teacher salaries, I think $27,000 is undoubtedly too low, but I read the other day that DISD is going to pay teachers who are willing to go to low-performing schools $80,000 a year, which is not bad money. And I don't know where that $27,000 comes up to a more living wage. I don't know what the salary structure is. But I'll leave you with one other. I don't think anybody wants our tax dollars to be wasted, whether they're Democrats or Republicans. And unfortunately, a lot of it is now. And we need to get more bang for the buck, not necessarily more bucks. About 20 years ago, I did have a little bit of teaching experience. I served as a substitute teacher when I was between my construction business and the job I got later. And I saw at Thomas Jefferson High School here in Dallas 3 things. I saw that students were not motivated. There wasn't much discipline in the classroom, and we didn't inspire them, and then we didn't have much relevance, because a lot of those kids didn't intend to go to college. They intended to become carpenters or laborers or whatever, and we weren't giving them the kind of education that would be useful to them there. So a lot of them dropped out, and that's still true today. Something like 40% of the kids that start the 9th grade don't finish their senior year in DISD. And that's really an unfortunate thing. And I think if we had more relevance, trade schools and that sort of thing, we would do that. But one last thing, we have a superintendent in DISD today who doesn't really respect his teachers. There's been a huge turnover in teachers in DISD, and it's because he micromanages. He tells him how to teach when he doesn't know how to teach, and you know, we need to do something about that. He has increased his administrative budget by 40%, And the purpose of that is a little private Gestapo that he sends around to the classrooms, and they make sure that every teacher does exactly what he tells them to do. And that's just sort of a power trip. But we have a school board election coming up really quick. And some of those people who are running for school board are in favor of changing that, some are not. You need to inform yourself about who they are and be sure that you vote.
Okay, who's next? Gotta be next. Come on up here. Oh, you were next, after him. Come on. Who was first? He's first. You're first. That's all right.
Well, I think it's true. Everyone gains perspective from their environment. I know I have much different view of the school system. And I was raised in an education family. In fact, I don't know if you ever ran across my dad. He was involved in OEA, but it's probably before your time. Bob Gentry? Probably before your time. Yeah. The thing I've experienced with the public schools has been atrocious. As a son of a professor, I was able to get into a special school and took advantage of that, but occasionally I'd get thrown back into the public school. When I was in 4th grade, 2 6th grade girls came up to me in the neighborhood and they informed me that I had to stop using big words because I was making the other children in the neighborhood feel bad and they were going to beat me up. And when you're a 4th grader and these 6th grade girls, I mean, they're like, you know, monsters, they're huge. Now they grow faster. And so I said supercalifragilisticexpialidocious and I ran like hell. And I got in track later, so, you know, I think if I were going to characterize the way I view the public school system, I would say they are the masters of mediocrity. And I know when I left home before I finished high school, and a lot of arm twisting, I was convinced to go ahead and finish out my senior year, even though I was located elsewhere, not at home. And I ended up at Classen High School there in Oklahoma City. And their straight A students there would not have even, they wouldn't have even been B students where I was. It was just amazing. The level was so much lower. And I observed in the corporate world that I had a certain job description. I did my job, and I did my job for years. I was with JCPenney Corporate for nearly 8 years. I never got any assistance. I never got any resources thrown at me. I watched people who were hired after me continually fail to do their assigned task and get more and more people thrown. Pretty soon they're the head of a department. I'm watching them growing departments, and as everyone working for them fails to do their job, then more and more resources are thrown at them. And this is my view of the school system, is just a massive administrative overhead and not doing the job. Individual teachers are my heroes. Individual teachers in the classroom dealing with a situation I have a great respect for, but all this administrative overhead, which just seems to keep growing and growing, and you know, the idea that, well, we've got to fix education, we need to throw more money at it. I don't think education is the only area that just totally needs to be just kind of taken down to ground zero and then brought back up. I mean, you know, let's reboot the thing and find out what works, because there's some real things that are not working there. But just wanted to give my 2 cents about the masters of mediocrity. Thank you.
I didn't hear. I taught for 23 years in mixed situations. I taught starting in 1977. I'm a product of the system that he was talking about, what then was called vocational education in Oklahoma, and I agree it was absolutely stalwart, had its own curriculum that they sold to the entire nation. And I learned well how to teach, in my opinion. One of the things that has been addressed as administration my last 6 years were spent in Hearst, Euless, Bedford. And HEB, if you look, the schools are not the Taj Mahals that some school districts are building. And the administration, even though it was unbelievable, was paid less than most administrators. And cost cutting was a constant issue because the theory of practice in HEB was to push as much money as you could toward classroom teachers so that they had absolutely everything that they needed, and they do a marvelous job of it. So some school districts can do that, and I have to take great actually insult at those of you who believe that public schools are mediocre. There are just some amazing teachers, and I think the percentage of them, I could walk around any classroom. In the last classroom that I walked in, and there would be teaching going on every minute. It is down. Teachers are so serious now. It is down to that if you walk into a classroom, you know when you were in school that 30 minutes before the bell, you were talking. You guys know that. I remember those times. You guys were talking and about what was going to go on, and your books were folded, and 15 minutes before the school was out, you were standing by the door waiting for the bell to get out. And those times are gone. You walk into a school now 3 minutes before the last bell, and you will see instruction. And until the bell rings, you will not see anything else happen. So very adamant about that. And that's in I taught, the last thing I taught was engineering, and in an 8th grade classroom and a 9th grade classroom, and that's even in a non-tested subject. My kids were busy until the bell rang, and they were doing as much as they could. Vouchers, I don't know that it's been said clearly, no offense. I don't think it's been said clearly exactly what that means. But here's what vouchers mean. If you're a former pro football player, and you know who I'm referring to, and you want to, if you own a building that you can't rent out, and you want to start a high school football team, then you open up a charter school and you get vouchers for it. And what you do is you teach football. And the same, I mean, you know, you got some other classes, but what you really care about is which kids bring vouchers to play on that football team, and you get money to rent your building, and you hire who you want regardless of whether they're qualified or not. And what you talk to them about as a principal is you talk to them about making sure that that kid passes your class. And that means you do what you need to change the numbers so that that kid qualifies to play football. Vouchers are an insane idea. They aren't just destructive of education, they're destructive of society. They separate us. They make it so that one group with one weird idea, like UFOs are real, open up a UFO school, and that's where it will go. That's not competition. That's insanity. Public schools, taxes, roads, courthouses are all for the public, not for individual people. Testing, I just want to point out, you may not know this, but I also taught 6 years in Irving. The average student in Irving moves 6 times in 1 year. They are renters. They don't have any money. Many are Hispanic, and move may mean they go back to Mexico for 3 months, and then they show back up at the school the week before testing. Hello. Why are the scores low? HEB, it's a horrible story. HEB was right on the cusp of being an exemplary school district. One kid, the superintendent, donated some money to Barack Obama. And one kid showed up and enrolled 2 days before the state test. The day before the state test, there was a warrant out for his arrest. He moved into the district. They didn't know him. He moved into the district and got arrested that day, missed the test, and therefore the number of kids that passed the test was 1 below the threshold. And the superintendent applied to the Republican appointed commissioner of education for an exemption for this kid that had never had any instruction in the school district, which was denied because, you know why? Because Gene Buinger had donated to the Democrats, and that meant that the school district was not exemplary. This testing thing is at best a bunch of hooey, and at most a way to make sure that everybody follows the line of the elected power. Some things have been said about how much, like now?
7 minutes.
Oh, stop. Stop.
We start at 5 and give you 2 extensions.
Who's next? Jim? Come on up here.
Well, I only have about 60 minutes worth for 5 minutes, so I'll do a little culling. Let me just tell you my background and experience with schools, as many of our folks here tonight have. Grew up in Dallas, inner city school, built in the 1800s. Has since been demolished. During 2nd grade, we moved out here to this neighborhood by White Rock Lake. There was only one school east of the lake at that time. Old separate community at the time it was built. Reinhardt. I was a year ahead. I was bored as heck in the 2nd grade. Just at that low level, there was a vast gap between inner city school and outer fringe of Dallas, not suburb. But Dallas schools were, after I started to college, I discovered were premium. I should have tested through my freshman courses. I was at least midway through the sophomore year in DISD classes. Nothing wrong with them whatsoever. My parents weren't really into education. My mother graduated from high school. My father's father was kicked in the head with a horse and by a horse, and so he had to drop out of school in the 5th grade and work. So I didn't come from a highly educated family, but I did get well educated in the Dallas schools, and then went to the University of Texas system, did an accounting degree, and became a CPA. And I discovered that a lot of the kids who were coming in from towns like you were exposed to in Arkansas and a lot in Oklahoma were coming in a year or 2 behind us, coming out of DISD, not out of what would now be regarded as high in the area, like Frisco or Allen or Plano, just for examples. So public schools have done well. Public schools do have good teachers in them. Unlike New York City, where they have to stick the bad ones off into a junk unused school and keep them on the payroll because they can't get them off, Dallas can get rid of the bad ones. And evidently the teachers are pretty good. I've had friends who've taught all the way through public schools. I wanted to. But at that time, the salaries were about half what they are now compared to other salaries. So if you didn't have a two-income family in teaching, you really couldn't even rent a basic place to live and feed yourself. You just couldn't make it on teacher salary. You can now. And many of the teachers do start at numbers higher than that $26,000 or $7,000 without teaching Spanish or hard to find subjects. The problem is not so much the teachers as it is the families. People don't want to talk about that. But when you don't have a two-parent household with enough time to provide parenting and assistance with schoolwork to the students, when you have a parent with 2 or 3 children working 2 or 3 jobs, and the kids running the streets and going to the classes unfed, unprepped, the teachers have a very difficult task. I feel for them. I watched my friends work all the way through teaching. One example, one of my friends taught home ec. Her last few years down at W.W. Samuel, virtually every year, every girl taking those home ec classes, the boys didn't take them for some reason. I wonder why. They needed to probably. Had at least one child. Quite often they got pregnant again during the course of the year. She would take them down and help them get part-time jobs so they could function and stay in school. How different it was. When she and I graduated from school here in Dallas in 1959, you didn't even hear of that sort of thing happening. I think I had one classmate in school who got pregnant. Totally different now. So the families, I think, are far more responsible for deficiency in the outcome of the students than the teachers are. Teachers are struggling. And with the Hispanic illegal aliens, undocumented aliens by today's words now, to deal with, like the example you gave tonight, what a struggle. How hard it is on the teachers. How horrible it is to get a bad mark because you can't keep the student in the class long enough to provide the teaching to them, making up for deficiencies that exist at home. When they go home, and now they have Spanish language television, and that's running 24/7, virtually, and they're getting no educational boot up from their parents, and they're coming in front of the teachers, and you guys have to struggle to get them up to par. I really feel for you. I have a lot of respect for you. We need to make some improvements in it, and I don't know what the magic solution is. I don't think anybody's figured out a way to plunk a magic twanger, Froggy, and have him pop out of the box and fix it all. I don't think one political party is responsible for all of it, but that's another subject, and I won't discuss it because my time is out. Thank you.
Turn off that camera. I'll time myself. Thank you so much for coming to speak to us tonight. One of the things that is the strength of this forum is the fact that we have people with so much life experience who are willing to come and share from their perspective and then listen to other people from different perspectives. And I honor you for being here. And I also honor you for your service as a teacher and also an organizer for teachers and on behalf of teachers. So thank you. I have I'm one of a family of 6 children. 2 of my sisters are teachers. One happens to be a Catholic nun as well as a teacher. Okay, so I see this from different perspectives. I had 2 siblings that went to public school. I happened to go to private school all my life. And while I'm very grateful that my parents struggled to pay for that and, you know, gave me that private school education, I would say that I think the perspective of going to a religious school at that time was very different than it is today. I don't want to send my tax dollars to vouchers for First Baptist Academy downtown to teach 10-year-olds that Democrats are baby-killing, unsaved people, and that Republicans are saved through the blood of Jesus.
Amen.
And know that abortion is the killing of babies. Okay? I'm sorry. And I'm getting that from 2 different parents that I worked with because I just happened to be working like 3 blocks from First Baptist Academy. And 2 different, years apart, 2 different sets of parents told me that that's what their kids were being taught. That was unsolicited. The first lady said, I was helping my son with his homework and I was trying to help him prepare for a test, and I read this and I went, oh, what? Now, and she's a very religious person, but she disagreed with that perspective of teaching a 10-year-old this. And then a couple of years later, another one of my coworkers, her daughter was going there as well, and I asked her, you know, what did they teach you in you know, about civics? Oh, you're not going to believe this, blah, 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 blah. Spat it out. So to me, that's very different from what I was taught. Yes, we had a pro-life club in school. Did I necessarily belong to that? No, it wasn't required. Okay? Yes, we went to Mass. Okay? Yes, sometimes we got pulled out of class to sing for funerals. All right? But, you know, I think reasonably done it can work, but I don't believe that we need to kill and bleed dry a free public education for all those kids whose parents cannot afford to send them to a private school. And that is what the voucher system does. Teaching to the test. Oh, the horror. I cannot imagine being a teacher and teaching to the test. One thing that I agree with you on 100% is that education should be about teaching people how to think, not what little facts to regurgitate. And how can you do that if you put only measures on people that reflect the, you know, spitting out facts? And how can you do that, for God's sake, teaching new math? Don't get me started on that. You know, when I see what gets posted about, you know, this is how to add 3 numbers in a column, craziness, absolute craziness. I think that the universal language, and I'm stealing this from someone else who's much brighter than me, the universal language is math, right? Cross cultures, everybody needs math. So why not have that be the first language that you teach in pre-K? Okay? Get people doing something that everybody can understand, right? Why not take the teachers and allow them to determine a little bit more over what they will be instructing in the classroom, within reason.
Yeah.
You know, you can't treat education, in my opinion, having worked in corporate America for almost 30 years now, you cannot treat education as a for-profit industry. One of the problems that I have, and one of my sisters did teach at a charter school. I probably should cover up this right here. It has the last name on it. She did teach at a charter school and had very interesting results from that, because you want to talk about a popularity contest? You want to talk about fairness? Good luck. I'll stop now, because I want somebody else to get an opportunity to speak. But thank you so much for being here.
Okay, who's next? Almost, come on. We gotta give time to the speaker. Go, you got 5 minutes.
Okay. Now, is your name Jim?
It's Jim.
Jim, I wanted to thank you for your impassioned plea for a living wage, for universal health care, for a proper social safety net, so that parents in our country can afford to stay at home and take care of their children without having to work 3 or 4 jobs. So I think you deserve a big round of applause for that. Thank you. Now, I want to tell you that it's not that complicated. What happens is we spend money on extremely fancy schools and very expensive materials and so on, because that goes into the pockets of business people who make money on it. That is exactly what is wrong with charter schools. That's exactly what's wrong with privatizing schools and so on, okay? Now, I used to be a college professor. I taught computer science. I was recruited by EDS, Electronic Data Systems, to come to Dallas, Texas and be a trainer in their boot camp, which was reputed at the time to be the world's best training for computer people. Okay? And I was the first person hired from outside the company to do that. Guess how many students they had per class? 10 students. I went on to do other corporate training for the advanced people, the systems engineers and so on. Do you know how many people they had in the class? 10 students. And this was also true when I went out doing it for Motorola, IBM Corporation, for Google, for Siemens, for Grumman Aircraft, for Manhattan Blue Cross Blue Shield, Empire State Blue Cross Blue Shield, for Swiss Bank, and so on. 10 students, at the very maximum 12. The reason is because the dynamic changes completely in the classroom the very second you get up above 10 or 12 students. If you want students to learn, you put 10 or 12 students in a classroom with a good teacher. That's what they do in Finland, #1 public school system in the world. They spend less per student than we do. So, that's it. Now, another thing. Let's talk about art and music. We need to get art and music back into the schools. You want to know why? Because art and music exercise the same parts of the brain that are used for analysis, which means for math and science. So you teach young children art and music, and it exercises their brains and makes them more capable of learning science and math later on. Finally, the other thing I want to tell you is my mother was a first grade teacher. And what she told me, and this is absolutely true, you focus on the young kids with early childhood education, and if you can get them through the 3rd grade with a real 3rd grade education, so that they're absolutely caught up and have a real 3rd grade education, you will not have to worry about their education from then on, because by the time they get to the 3rd grade, the ones that have the problems later are already behind. And so the key is early childhood education, small classrooms, and get art and music back into the classrooms. And I guarantee you that will solve the problems with our school system. But we don't want to do that. We want to put 30 students in a class, and then we want to have these temples to football and things like that instead of educating the students. So it's better pay per teacher, smaller classrooms, simpler materials, art and music. That's the program that will fix our schools, along with proper social safety net, universal health care, a minimum wage, a living wage, and so on, so that parents can, in fact, afford to work 1 job and be at home to parent their children. Thank you.
Go ahead.
We're out of time. He's already spoken.
Yes, I only took 4 minutes. My older sister is a professor of French at a university. How do you learn French? You go into a classroom where only French is spoken. we are depriving Hispanic children with this multilingual approach.
Amen.
Absolutely. Thank you.
How about one more?
Respond to that last comment.
We're out of time. I think, anyway, I don't even have time, but I was gonna give a speech, I can't give one. I wanna thank our speaker for being here today, he did a terrific job. Got us all thinking and talking, that's 90% of it. And he is gonna get the last word now. You get the last word, you get to comment on all the comment that was made here, and, get the last word.
Well, I don't need 5 minutes. I'll try to be quick. You know, I think one, there's a lot of commonality in what all of us are talking about and what we're thinking, and in generally, I think we all believe essentially the same thing. We know we need the good schools. Some of us are just too cheap to pay for them. Some of us just want religious education in the public schools, and that's their belief, you know. And it's hard to change people's beliefs if that's what they really believe, right or wrong. That's the way it is. If we could just concentrate instead of picking schools apart, like we should stop picking people apart, and find out what's right with the schools, and then just build on what's right and keep getting them better and better and better, we'd be having all this debate. We just concentrate on what's right and build on that. A couple of quick things. I don't know how we get it across to people that are not educators and haven't really spent the time in it, but schools don't make widgets, and competition is not the issue. Teachers can't bid out their services. If you want to let teachers bid out their services and have unions like you do in construction or some other businesses, then that might be a different thing to talk about, because you would change the whole dynamic. But as long as teachers are not able to bid out their services, and we need to stop blaming teachers, because most of your complaints that we hear from people are really with the administration. We don't hear a whole lot of complaints about specific teachers as much as when you go to school with a problem, you usually are dealing with the administration. I do agree that there are big changes that need to be made and could be made, but they won't change anything until you get the people who do the job involved in what the changes are and how the system works. If you want to have a good system, you can have it, and you probably can. If we had smaller class sizes, as the gentleman was just saying here, you would cut a lot of other auxiliary costs that accrue to education, because you're trying to remedy and re-remedy and take care of other issues outside the schools. When you have teachers having to be nurses, counselors, parental support, you know what I'm talking about. When they have to do everything for a family that's not being done by the family for that kid, then you have a real problem. And so many things that we hear that become generalized are just anecdotal. You can talk about, well, this happened, or I heard this in this school. But it's not all schools. It's like everything else. Everything is not that way. But if we revamp the system, and we could build on what teachers know and let teachers teach, you wouldn't even be talking about vouchers, because then you'd have a system where it would work. We let doctors practice medicine, we let lawyers practice, we let construction people do the construction. We don't go out and tell them what to do or how to hammer the nail. We don't tell doctors how to operate on the heart. We don't tell the secretary how to word process a document. But we all think we can go tell teachers how to teach. And that's a big problem. And again, I'll stick by what I have always contended, because I've lived it. Most of it is out of greed and people who don't want to pay taxes, and they make up excuses for why. Thank you again for having me. I've enjoyed it. And thank you for your comments. That helps me.
Okay, that's it for tonight. we retire down to Starbucks at the corner. Our speaker is welcome. We'll buy him coffee, and we carry on the conversation if you so desire. Have a good, and see you next week.